the webinar with Marty Hurwitz, interviewed by Yonick. Marty Hurwitz is the CEO and founder of MVEye. Marty became a third-generation jewelry retailer when he partnered with a childhood friend in a retail jewelry store in 1984. He founded the MVEye Marketing LLC in 1989 together with his wife and moved to California, where they grew the MVEye into an internationally recognized organization. The MVEye provides consumer and trade market research along with strategic consulting services to a global client list in the gems, jewelry, and watch industries. Interviewed by Deborah, who has been writing about jewelry and the business of selling it for many years, she began her career in the industry many years ago as editor-in-chief of Colored Stone magazine and senior editor for National Jeweler before becoming an independent writer in 1996. She also develops and manages content for a variety of companies and organizations in the jewelry trade. GemAtlas is an online global B2B networking platform for the gems and jewelry industry. We help you connect with businesses and professionals around the world. We can easily start generating new business leads through our platform. We are honored to have this discussion, and the topic for today is awareness and acceptance of lab-grown diamonds in Europe. The MVEye has also decided to share their research report with all the attendees at the end of the session. So please do ask your questions in the Q&A section below and have them answered at the end of the discussion. Over to you, Marty and Debbie.
Good morning, and good afternoon, and good evening wherever you are. Thanks so much for this awesome opportunity. I have to say, I think we're going to just dive right into it. Marty, how about you? You ready?
Yeah, I'm ready to go. I just wanted to take one moment, Deb, before your first question to just a word of thoughts and concerns for all of our friends and colleagues in India and throughout the world that are suffering from COVID right now. We are very aware of the toll this is taking on our lives of all of our friends and family. No one of us has been left untouched by this, so our prayers and thoughts are with you.
Hear, hear. I second that. Thank you for sharing that. So Marty, I thought a good place for us to start would be for you to kind of tell us a little bit about the history of the research that MVEye has done in the category of lab-grown diamonds, and then particularly about the latest and exciting new study of the European market.
Sure. So as Nicole mentioned, we've been doing this for 30 plus years now. MVEye has a very particular niche in consumer and trade research and intel in the gem, jewelry, and watch industries. And around 2004, we started picking up on the evolution of the technology of lab-grown diamonds and how it was reaching the stage of being able to produce gem quality goods, 1 carat white goods consistently. The original technology had actually been around since the 1950s. General Electric was instrumental in it, but around 2004, it began to evolve to gem quality. And that was when we launched our first consumer research study to see a baseline measurement of whether consumers would be interested in lab-grown diamonds, what their reactions might be. And we began to study it year after year, particularly in the US, because the US not only was the beginning source of the technology, but also was a very large consumer market for diamonds, still is today, 50% of the world's consumer consumption of diamonds. So year over year, we started to see progress in consumer awareness and potential acceptance. There wasn't a lot on the market in those early years. About 2 years ago, however, the pace really quickened both in consumer awareness, acceptance, and also the supply pipeline. The technology began to advance, more growers came into being. It became an international manufacturing story with the evolution of India and China getting into the production of grown diamonds. And so consumers were seeing more of it, they were more interested in it, and they were certainly broadening the scope of product that they were looking at. Last year, we conducted a groundbreaking study, which we're going to reference again today, on the latest in US interest. At the same time, we began fielding amongst our clients and from consumers as well, a lot of interest in Europe in the category and what was happening with it. And so that was why we decided to launch the study that we are releasing today of consumer, baseline measurement of consumer awareness and acceptance of lab-grown diamonds in Western Europe in 5 different countries, Spain, Italy, Germany, France, and the United Kingdom. The results were quite exciting, and we're going to share some of them with you. And please remember, everybody that's attending today will get a code from GemAtlas following this webinar, so you can download the report for free from our website.
Marty, how many people, respondents were there in the latest survey?
There were over 1,500 consumer respondents in the study, above 300 from each different country. And each of them were screened in or out based on their jewelry purchases. We wanted real jewelry consumers in this study. We skewed the audience to what you might call next-gen consumers, 25 to 40 years of age. But we also required them to have purchased or have gifted a piece of jewelry in the last 2 years above a certain value.
So what were some of the most unexpected and surprising findings for you in the latest survey?
Yeah, I mean, this, I'm going to show you a few slides in answer to this question from the research report itself. There were a couple of very surprising results that I think took all of us by surprise, especially on the analytics side compared to what we'd been seeing in the US. We expected awareness of lab-grown diamonds to be good in the European market, but we did not expect the dramatic level of awareness and even purchases that were happening and are already happening in the European market, particularly amongst these 5 leading consumer powerhouse countries. Most surprising, I think, was Italy, where amongst the respondents to this study, 86% of the respondents said that they were aware of lab-grown diamonds beforehand. Even if we factor in a margin of error of give or take 3%, that's still a really big outlier number. The other countries overall were at 77%, which is quite high. It turns out a number of factors are affecting this, but clearly younger consumers in Europe are very aware of lab-grown diamonds. Some have already purchased. They have different value drivers for why that is, but there is absolutely a high interest among these consumers and even an early propensity to purchase lab-grown diamonds in both bridal and fine fashion. That purchase rate, comparative to the US purchase rate, which we all know is growing quite dramatically as more and more retailers stock the product, is quite high. 40% of the European consumers in this study report that they have already purchased or received lab-grown diamond jewelry. That's comparatively very strong compared to the U.S. results. Now, we also know quite a bit about the younger consumer in Europe, perhaps more socially engaged than the U.S. younger consumer, particularly on issues such as in sustainability and ESG, environmentally friendly products, not just in jewelry, but in all consumer goods. And that was reflected in this study as well. We saw both a high level of a value driver of environmental friendliness and sustainability that people attach to lab grown. But we also saw an articulation in the open-ended responses that was quite dramatic. And in a minute, I'll share some of those responses with you.
So what were some of the similarities and things that you expected to see if you were comparing the major US study from 2020 to this latest study?
Well, the things we expected were, again, the next gen consumer to be buying into the value driver of sustainability. And the comparison. We also expected that consumer to be very conscious of the impact of mining, not just in diamonds, but in all materials that come out of the earth. We expected them to be a lot more aware of that impact in the communities where mining takes place. And again, that was reflected in the response, both positively and negative, that we heard, both verbatim responses and multiple choice responses. This consumer in Europe is, I would say, more in touch, more news aware than the US consumer. Not to knock the US consumer, but it just seemed to me, it just seems to me, and I think this is commonly accepted, that a European consumer is more well-read and more aware of social issues. So we expected that. We saw the comparison of sort of in the gender splits and in the cross tabulations by gender. We saw a lot of similarity. We actually saw men a little more engaged in the issues surrounding lab-grown diamonds than in the U.S., and that was refreshing. We saw quite a bit of interest in the fine fashion category in Europe, and that's significant because to date there isn't a lot of fine fashion lab-grown jewelry available to consumers globally. We're expecting that to increase as more manufacturers of jewelry put more fashion product on the market. To date, the category has been predominantly bridal, but we see both in the U.S. and in Europe a great interest in fine fashion jewelry made with lab grown, and it makes sense. It's a big look. It's a more consistent look than Melly from Mine diamonds in fine fashion jewelry. The consumer gets more value. They get a more consistent product, and the pipeline of suppliers, both growers, distributors, and even jewelry manufacturers, all achieve more margin in fine fashion jewelry with lab grown Melly. So we expect that category to grow, and we also expect more designers to get into it because there's a lot of opportunity. So those are some of the things that we thought were expected but still interesting. And if I may,
share some of those comments, which I thought were very detailed, much more so than we've seen in other surveys, I think. Yeah,
that's correct. And, this is, again, reflective of perhaps a a more well-informed younger consumer, but in presentation of the lab-grown concept statement and in images we showed these consumers, we asked them to give us their comments in a verbatim, open-ended format. And the responses, as you can see here, were not entirely about lab-grown. Some were about mining also, but they were very well thought out, very well written, which leads me to believe that the lab-grown market in Europe may have an even more powerful audience when it becomes more mature than it is already experiencing in the US. And also the opportunity for more premium price points may exist in Europe because this consumer is more sensitive to the issues, the value drivers surrounding lab-grown versus mined diamonds. So you can see that just a few of the excerpts here. When you see the report, you'll get more of a sense of this as well.
And also, I found interesting in the European market in terms of preferenced retailers, that the high-end retailers were leading for those who responded to the survey as a place they like to shop. So that would bode well, I assume, on lab-grown diamonds being more comfortable in those traditional settings we may not have expected to see them before. Thoughts on that?
Yeah, absolutely. By the end of this year, by Q4 of 2021, there will be a few luxury Place Vendôme type brands in lab-grown, and this will carry forth into next year. You may have seen the news about Chanel investing in one of the lab-grown brands in Europe, and that brand is actually Courbet is en route to expanding into China. So these brands, these higher end brands, are very aware of consumer acceptance and interest in this category, and they are looking at it very carefully. The big issue for them is consistency and quality of supply. Can they get bigger, better goods on a scalable level? And can they get them regularly so that they can produce a higher end product and achieve the margins they need to achieve? That's not quite clear to them. It is an evolving space in terms of the differentiation of suppliers and who can produce the product of quality lab-grown versus commercial lab-grown on a consistent basis. But without a question, by the end of this year, you will see these higher-end luxury brands in this space.
So we have some really good questions coming in. If I can throw a few at you now.
Yes, please do.
Yes. One question from Modit: will the price of real diamonds come down? And if so, any indications?
Seems to me that the price of real diamonds are stabilizing post-COVID, and there's even been some increasing in those prices. I believe the mining concerns are trying to recapture some of the lost profits they had during COVID, as we all are. So I think the pie, ironically, COVID was a period of boom for the jewelry industry globally. Pretty counterintuitive, but people turned to jewelry for emotional reasons, and they weren't traveling, so they had more cash in their wallets, and jewelry is one of the categories that was benefited by that. So both mined diamonds, we don't like to use the word real diamonds, mined diamonds and lab-grown diamonds both benefited from COVID. I do not see the price of diamonds going further down at all. There's a question in here as well. You may have seen this, Deb, from one of the attendees, unlimited number of lab-grown diamonds can be produced. Will the after sales market be a race to zero? I don't think this is the case at all, and I'll tell you why. Not all growers are created equal, and not all diamonds are created equal. There are clearly differentiation happening amongst the growers. The main growing differentiation is between better quality goods that can be scaled. I'm talking about DEF, VVS goods that can be scaled in volume from 75 points and higher up to 3-4 carats, and particularly in fancy shapes. So it is not a race to a bottom, and not all growers are created equal. And it's important for people to accept that there is discounting going in the pipeline, in the supply pipeline going on. And that it tends to be for the lesser quality, more commercial goods, those goods that are post-growth treated, for example, in the 1 carat size are the ones that are where there's heavy discounting. But those discounts, interestingly enough, are not happening at retail. They're happening in the supply pipeline. Retailers who are smart are allowing consumers to come in with their budget. Let's say it's a $5,000 budget. Everybody shops for bridal with a budget. In the US, if it's $5,000 spend that the consumer comes in with, if you're a good retailer, you don't want to reduce their spend. You want to show them the choice of a mine versus a lab grown and let them pick which they want. The choice should be theirs. But what they see for their choice is maybe a 1 carat mine versus a 1 1/3 carat lab grown of the same size and quality. Now, 7 out of 10 consumers in the US, and I believe ultimately in Europe also, will gravitate to the bigger stone. And that's pretty much what was happening.
Yeah, did you see that in the European study though? That I thought it was stronger in the US survey, the people who gravitated toward the bigger stone. It didn't necessarily seem as strong. Do you think that's just because it's new and evolving market and that will change over time?
Well, we're in the infancy of this market. If we're at 5% of the global diamond market, that's a lot. The truth of the matter is, right now, the growers of lab-grown diamond can't even keep up with the demand that exists right now, particularly for bigger, better goods and fancies. People in India are seeing a massive demand for 75 pointers to 99 pointers in lab grown, and that the prices for that product are skyrocketing. So when we get to 10% of the diamond business, every grower in the planet will be stressed to keep up with that demand. So I see a real stabilization happening, particularly as this bifurcation happens between commercial, moderate quality suppliers and better suppliers.
So we have another question from one of our attendees. Do you see fancy colors in lab grown being in big demand, especially that Lightbox started out with fancy color? And if so, how do you see designers benefiting from this?
That's a great question. The evolution of designers getting into lab grown, it's been happening slowly. Part of the reason was they didn't have access to color in either bridal or in Mellie. It's a little bit hard to grow consistent color. It was really hard to grow consistent white goods in lab grown, but it's turning out to be really hard to grow consistent color. I have seen very high quality pink Mellie, but to grow pink Mellie to the scale of, say, what Argyle produced in mine goods for all these years is hard and challenging. It's happening. It's not inexpensive on the lab grown side, and it will expand. And yes, that's one of the reasons, in combination with white Mellie, that we foresee more brands and designers getting into the fine fashion side.
Something you've talked about before, I've heard you speak on, is that There may be a lot of people with investments who want to come into this category, but there's a very finite group of scientists and people who are skilled in the technology to pull it off. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, this is a significant differentiation. There's a lot of capital looking to invest in growing diamonds. We get approached regularly by investors throughout the world that want to buy into growing facilities. And of course, the biggest cost of growing is the energy required to run the chambers. That's true with the semiconductor industry also. But there's no shortage of capital. Anybody can put up the money to put these machines up. It turns out the real shortage is in the human scientists that have experience in growing diamonds. You can get material scientists at PhD level that can set up factories and set up the equipment, but you can't take this equipment out of the box and just turn it on. There's a lot of scientific know-how needed to get the reactors growing, and every reactor, even if you know what you're doing, takes 3 to 5 months to get it producing consistent gem quality. So you can train scientists on the job to get up to speed, but that takes a year or two to do that. Meanwhile, you have all this demand on the investment you've made in the technology and the equipment, and you need to be able to make money on ROI on your investment. So on-the-job training is very expensive, and there's a real shortage of human scientists to grow this product in an effective, quick way.
Yeah, I thought that was important for you to underscore there. Another great question from one of our attendees: how can small-scale manufacturers and traders of lab-grown increase sales online? Like, which online platforms would you suggest?
Well, if you're talking B2B, I would say GemAtlas is one of the leaders in the global exchange market, for lack of a better term. I think one of the keys for smaller traders is to ensure their sourcing. One of the issues with online trading on the B2B platforms is that it's well known amongst the buying community that a lot of people are publishing API data feeds of the same inventory from the growers. So that's not a good way to do it. Distributors, wholesalers, for which there is a great need in the industry, it's a valuable part of the supply chain, but you have to represent inventory that's actually in your control. You can't represent inventory that's just getting API fed to the exchanges, because then everybody knows the game you're playing and there's no real uniqueness in your offering. So you have to stake out positions with prime growers who would be willing to work with you if you are a wholesaler, as long as you are committing asset purchases from those growers. That's the single biggest thing that middlemen can do at this point. Their services are needed. There's no question the downstream players, whether they're manufacturers or retailers or even direct-to-consumer e-commerce players, need the wholesaler components of the supply chain. They need it much more than the mine diamond side needs it. But you as a distributor need to stake out asset positions with prime growers, not just present the same data feeds that everybody else is presenting.
Another great question from the audience. Which are the best countries for lab-grown consumption apart from the United States?
On a consumer level, Europe, absolutely. The European countries, particularly France and the UK, appear to be early leaders in Europe. France, because a number of e-commerce sites, including Loyal Paris, Courbet, we mentioned earlier. In the UK, Chelsea Rocks, Carrot London, are all players in this space already, and I think that's going to grow. Those are some of the early adopters that are doing well. and I think you will see them continuing with Courbet's venture into China. Everybody, of course, wants to know what China's reaction is going to be to lab-grown diamonds. Our preliminary indication is it's going to be positive, particularly as the growers get better at bigger, high-quality, scalable goods. We also know that India, as a consumer market, is showing signs of having great interest in lab-grown diamonds, and I expect that to continue as well. Some of the Indian major diamond players, both site holders and non-site holders, are developing downstream direct-to-consumer initiatives in lab-grown.
And then, of course, the survey showed from a consumer standpoint that Italians are very, very enthusiastic about the product. And they seem to score very high and least skeptical about it. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I thought that was striking. Really shocked me because they're such a traditional European powerhouse. I thought they would be resistant. Interesting thing that you see in Europe, even before the evolution of lab-grown diamonds, the styling of jewelry is different than the U.S., where the U.S. is big and brash, low cash, big flash. The European styling is much classier, much more diminutive. Even the use of diamonds in jewelry is very elegant, even for the lower price pointed consumer. The styling is very fashionable, but not at all as big as the U.S., not at all, not as ostentatious as the U.S. And I think the Italian consumer is gravitating to those styles that show, instead of a carat and a quarter, maybe a 75-point center stone. In Mellie sizes, they're using Mellie in a very diminutive, fashion-forward way. And I think if you combine that with, say, recycled gold or sustainably traced source gold or fair mined gold, the Italian consumer and the European consumer in general is going to be very attracted to lab-grown.
We have a question here from our friend Steve Feldman in the audience. Do you see European jewelry designers and manufacturers selling to the U.S. market?
Yeah, that's a great question, Steve. And we are already seeing several European designers that are going to be coming here with product. I believe as soon as the JCK August show, you will see in Couture and in the JCK luxury show, you will see European designers here with lab-grown styles, and I think it's only going to grow. There are some new brands also that will be entering the U.S. market from Europe with lab-grown.
Another question here from Roberto. De Beers was vehemently opposed to lab-grown diamonds, and having realized that if you can't beat them, then join them, they now promote their own lab-grown diamond under Lightbox jewelry. Will we see other natural diamond producers moving into the lab-grown space and thus legitimizing lab-grown diamonds as natural diamonds? Can both natural and lab-grown survive side by side?
Well, I'm going to answer the last question first. The answer is absolutely they can survive side by side. It's all about giving the consumer a choice. In every other consumer goods category, when a choice is given of a new product in the category expands. What we're seeing here with these younger consumers in Europe gravitating because of the sustainability message to lab-grown, these are consumers that to date might not even have walked into a traditional jewelry store. So the expansion of the category, the growing of the pie is what we see happening and is what our research has been telling us. This is not a cannibalization. This is an expansion of the category with a new, younger consumer demographic who heretofore has been reluctant, hesitant to embrace traditional jewelry. Will other natural diamond producers get into lab-grown? Good question. We might see that. We have heard some conversations about it. It would not surprise me. because mining is expensive and it's very hard to find new mining deposits anywhere on Earth. They've pretty much used every geological method available to them to figure out where the new deposits are, and they are struggling to get new deposits on this planet. Maybe when they get to Mars, that may change.
Project for another day. A question here from Mark Smith in the audience. Is there or will there be an independent quality rating process for lab-grown diamonds separate from mine diamonds?
Yeah, this is a good one also. We would love to see this, both in terms of quality and in terms of pricing. Internal to the trade, the pricing, as everybody knows, is still back of wrap discount numbers. I think you're going to see some of the the prime growers evolve away from that. They don't like have their pricing be determined by the wrap price list. Neither do the mine people, for that matter. So I think you're going to see some independent pricing structures evolve on the prime grower level. In terms of quality rating, you are seeing the beginning of some of the lab certifying bodies to create their own distinctive lab-grown ratings in terms of chain of custody, in terms of sustainability ratings. You're seeing outside third-party entities like SCS Global now ranking and rating the growers. And you're going to see some more evolution of that. I think it's a healthy thing, and I certainly would encourage it, the lab-grown industry, to separate out as much as possible from the mine diamond industry.
Okay, we have a question here. How much energy is used to make a carat stone, and where is this energy from? I talk a little bit about that aspect of production with lab-grown diamonds.
Yeah, this is not an area of expertise of mine, but it is the most expensive part of growing lab-grown diamonds. But suffice to say, the growers are well aware, both from a sustainability side, an eco-friendly side, and a cost side, of how to reduce that energy footprint. And I think you will see in the very near future some very significant undertakings by prime growers in the world to address that issue. They are aware of both the cost of energy in terms of dollar spend and on their bottom line, but also, more importantly, the planetary costs of it in terms of climate change. Here's one question, if I could jump in here, Deb, that I think is interesting as well, from Daniel. Do you think sustainability certification will be more icing on the cake, or will sustainability become a differentiator that will drive an increase in real retail prices? Now, this is something I feel very strongly about. I think the advent of sustainability certification and ESG management for all companies in the consumer sphere is critical. And we saw this in the European research results. And the American industry has been resistant to this in jewelry, and it's been a little surprising to us. But you can see in category of consumer goods, category by category, from fashion to accessories to jewelry, the companies that take sustainability to heart and allow third-party certification of their product will profit from it and will capture more consumer premium and consumer attention, particularly because of the next-gen consumer. They are gravitating right now to brands in all consumer categories that are putting their sustainability certification in the forefront of their marketing message, and not just as a greenwashing message, as a real part of their overall strategy and their overall company DNA. If a company will do that now, they will lock in these next-gen consumers who are at the beginning of their discretionary spend career they will lock them in for the next 30 years. If they don't do that, they will take a chance on losing that consumer. So we believe very strongly that integrating third-party sustainability certification is both valuable to people in the lab-grown space and the jewelry space overall, by the way, and also will achieve premium at retail.
Do you find consumer awareness of as-grown versus treated lab-grown diamonds? So a little education on the as-grown and the treated in these two segments of the category.
Okay, so this goes back to what we touched on earlier. Not all lab-grown diamonds are created equal. Not all lab-grown growers are created equal. There is tremendous pressure right now in the market to sell the output of any growing factory. If you are growing, your demand from your customers is off the charts. You cannot keep up with how many people want to buy product from you. So if you want to grow bigger stones of better color, it takes a little bit more time to grow them. And if you're not confident in your growing skill or your scientists on your team, that additional growing time has risk. Things can go wrong the longer you grow. If things go wrong, the stone can fracture and you can lose the output, which means it's worthless to you. If you want to grow bigger and you want to wait for the growth to go bigger or the color to evolve to whiter, things can go wrong. Meanwhile, you have all these customers throwing money at you. So some people, the majority of growers, rather than face that risk and that economic uncertainty, are stopping the growth process and using HPHT post-growth treatment to achieve the higher color rating. Completely understandable. I'm not judging. That's just a differentiation in the market. Some people are able to do as grown and achieve bigger, whiter goods without second processing. And some people don't want to take that risk to do it or are not 100% comfortable that they can achieve it. And that's a real differentiation in the market. By the way, this also relates to a unique opportunity in lab-grown growing that's outside of the gem sphere, and that is scientific application. The scientific possibilities for lab-grown are massive, but they're in their infancy, and they take a lot of research and development. I'm speaking specifically about quantum computing, space travel, semiconductor work, defense work. All these are big money applications for lab-grown diamonds. But in order to do the research and development, you have to dedicate your chambers you have to take them off of gems and put them into scientific research and development. Of course, that means the money flow stops from the gem supply, the gem customers. So it's a balance that everybody needs to strike.
So there's a couple of questions about pricing and transparency in pricing. One manufacturer of diamonds indicates that there's a huge gap in India, the US, and Europe. I know you spoke a little bit about that earlier. Maybe you could touch on differences in pricing with lab grown.
Yeah, this is a fluid situation, dynamic every single day. There are categories that are available, such as 1 carat post-growth treated commercial goods, HI color, VS to SI goods. It's very readily available, heavily discounted in the US. Not really that interesting to European market yet. Certainly not interesting to the Chinese and or Japanese market that's going to demand better, bigger goods. But even in the US, bigger, better goods, DEF color, VS, VVS goods, 1.5 carat and larger, fancy shapes, tremendous demand for fancy shapes, a real shortage in the market of those goods, just not being grown, just not being cut yet as in the quantities that the market will demand. So again, we're in the infancy, and the pricing structure is dynamic. There's a lot of stabilization in better goods. It's 100% supply and demand. So what's readily available in the market is heavily discounted, and what's not is not being discounted. I'm talking about on the B2B pipeline level.
Another question, in the US, independent jewelry stores were adopting lab-grown diamonds before the majors were. Do you see a similar trend in Europe happening?
I certainly do. This is a big opportunity for the independent retailer, a chance for them to compete, finally with the biggest retailers who have the biggest marketing spend. And here's a couple of reasons why. One, telling the story of lab-grown diamonds is really exciting and really interesting to this next-gen consumer. It's essentially a technology revolution, and that type of story is very attractive to both male and female next-gen consumers. It's not so easy to tell that story unless you can get them one-on-one over the counter. So this is a real brick-and-mortar opportunity for independent retailers. It requires training of the sales staff, but that training is easier for an independent than it is for a major retailer. So that's one way of doing it. The other way of doing it is, this is not a mass advertising campaign. Nobody's advertising this, yet consumers are finding out about it quite organically through social media, through referrals, through news stories, through content on the web, the way younger consumers are finding out about everything. And so that's really an opportunity for independent retailers to get active in their social media channels, their newsletters, their videos, their Reddit platforms, and that's how you engage with these consumers. And telling the lab-grown story there will get them both onto your website to learn more, and they can either buy there, or more likely they can make an appointment to come into the store and hear it and see it in person. This is turning out to be a real omni-channel value story for independent retailers, a very competitive advantage against majors.
Another question, despite current regulations that are in place, is there or should there be fear of labs trying to bypass these regulations to sell or pass lab-grown diamonds as earth mined?
Yeah, I'm a big believer in complete and honest transparency, and we should be pushing that as an industry, because we can't just greenwash or whitewash the story to consumers. We need to sell throughout the pipeline and at the consumer level, a transparent, honest story about this new exciting product category. There's going to be bad actors. We know that from the history of the jewelry industry and the diamond industry. There are a small percentage of bad actors. We need to take the higher ground here, the higher integrity place with this new category.
So kind of looking at the baseline that's been created with this latest exciting new study in Europe, what are your expectations, your projections for this product category in the European market? And also, what advice do you have for brands, for retailers in the European market and beyond based on that?
I project in my crystal ball, and based on the research we've done to date, and the research is ongoing, you will see Europe grow based on what we've seen in this report. You will also see European brands, as was asked earlier, begin to go global with lab-grown designer collections, with bigger, better product, higher quality jewelry, higher price point jewelry. And that will mean the opening up of Asia. The Japanese and Chinese markets are standing by to see bigger, better product, branded stories with high quality brand names as well. I think you will see India open up dramatically within the next year and a half in terms of a consumer market for lab grown. We take a lot of inquiries from people reading our research all over the world. This category is not going away. I think within a couple of years, we'll be 10 to 15% of the mine diamond business, and that number will be gigantic. This webinar will be recorded. Thank you again to GemAtlas for doing that, and it will be distributed widely. Again, also the report, you're going to get an email with a code from GemAtlas, so you can download the report free immediately following this webinar as soon as you get that email. And I would encourage you to do that. If we haven't answered your question specifically, you're welcome to email me directly, and I will engage with you as soon as you do. No problem there. We understand there's some limitations on the time, and you're all probably pretty busy in your own right. So feel free to download the report, read it in depth, and then email me any direct questions that you have. So with that, I think we're going to turn it back over to Nicole. And thank you for everybody for your attention. And really, our prayers and our hearts are with you, and hope we can all get through this COVID crisis as quickly as possible.
Thank you so much for sharing your valuable time and expertise, both Marty and Debbie. I think it's been a fabulous discussion with a very, very active and an engaging audience. Just to reiterate what Marty had said is that we have put a link in the chat box for the report that MVEye has created, and we will also email the same to all of you. We would also really like to thank you once again for a very active participation, and we hope that you all enjoyed the session and use this knowledge to your advantage in your respective businesses. If you have any other questions that may not have been answered and you would like to have them answered, you could definitely also email it to us at info@gematlas.com, and we will also forward the same to Marty. So thank you and have a good day, and everyone, please do stay safe.
Thanks, everyone.